Hey, welcome to episode 234 of KT Confidential, the real estate podcast. Today, we're talking about septic systems and what you should know if you're buying a home with one. All right, friend, today we're talking about buying a home with a septic system.
Which has become a more relevant discussion, I'd say, ever since the pandemic. So it was 2020.
Yeah, a lot of people moving to rural areas, a lot of people buying cottages.
It was a very hot market. Cottage country was booming. Rural areas, everyone was moving out of the city. They wanted more land.
Yep.
So it became a very relevant topic.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is, like, if you talk to city dwellers, quote unquote, not too many people know about septic systems.
Well, I think probably because of a lack of knowledge, they're intimidated by it.
Right.
As soon as you say, it's...
Well, you hear horror stories about how expensive replacing a septic system is, or...
Sure, yeah.
Your backup of sewage coming into your home.
Well, I mean, that happens with municipal services too, right? That's why they've got the backflow valves.
Yeah.
So that stuff could happen anywhere.
So I'm going to put it in simple terms. We'll start off with what a septic system actually is. And the simplest way to explain it, you've got essentially a sewage pipe that goes into some form of a tank. We'll talk a little bit about tanks and whatnot. And then there is, from the tank, a distribution system that goes into what's typically called a leaching field.
Or bed.
Or a septic bed.
Yeah.
And it does some bacterial magic along the way.
Bacterial magic.
Magic.
Yes, it does.
So what do you need to know about septic systems, how to treat them?
I think that's the most important part, because if people are afraid of them, so you don't need to be. So let's talk about the important things.
So if you're buying a home that has a septic system, there's no need to be afraid. And it's actually a quite simplistic system. Can there be expenses revolving around ownership of a septic system? Absolutely. Here's the thing. If you have an opportunity to have the septic system inspected, get an inspection done. That
Absolutely.
Will give you complete peace of mind. It'll also educate you as to, what exactly that system is, its condition, etc. It is very, very, very important to understand that a typical home inspection, or I should say a typical home inspector, will not be properly qualified to inspect a septic system.
No.
Now, some of them might say, "Oh yeah, I can do a septic inspection." No, a septic inspection should be done by somebody that is specialized in that area. And a true septic inspection will include the septic tank being pumped out prior to it being inspected. So the tank gets emptied. You can visually inspect
They'll look at the baffles,
the tank, the baffles, to make sure that
tell you what type of tank it is, what kind of condition it's in.
Yeah, the approximate age.
Yes.
A lot of them also have cameras that they'll put into the system, into the piping, to see if everything's flowing right. Is there anything to be concerned with?
So another thing to be mindful of when you're buying a property with a septic system is to know where the septic system is before you buy it, especially
100%.
If you have plans on doing something as far as an addition or an auxiliary building or a pool. You may see a big open field out back and think, "Oh, that's a perfect spot for my pool." Meanwhile, you don't know that that's the leaching bed. So you have to be aware of that.
Well, and even to that extent, to that point, even if it's in an area that you're not thinking about building on or putting a pool in, if any heavy equipment will need to go over that area,
You cannot drive on it.
So, fun fact, my cottage, the septic system is approximately, I want to say it's about 12, 13 years old now, maybe a bit older. And the reason it was the tank, septic tank, is the reason it was replaced was the previous owner had the cottage lifted and the foundation supported. And when they did that, the machinery that they brought in went right over the tank, and, heavy equipment condenses and collapses the soil and everything above the tank. And that's what happened. And it put too much pressure on the tank, and the tank broke.
Right. Well, and the other component is the septic bed, where if you are driving on that, you could damage pipes as well, but you're also compacting soil, which impedes the system's ability to properly filter.
So I was looking for some explanations so we can reiterate, or talk about, I should say, how a septic system works. And again, I want to put it in looser terms so it's easy to understand. Everything you flush or anything that goes down your drains goes into this tank.
Has to be biodegradable. Well, not even that, because an apple core is biodegradable.
No, it has to be liquid waste that is natural.
Well, as an example, a lot of people may be used to, rinsing off bacon grease from a frying pan or from whatever and dumping it down with hot water in a drain. You don't want to do that. I mean, you shouldn't do that anyways, but you should definitely not do it if you have a septic system, because those fats will solidify and cause damage to the system.
So a septic tank is in essence its own biological system. And there is bacteria that basically eats all of your
waste.
Thank you.
I wanted to give you a quick word before you chose something else.
Thank you. And then the liquid that spills out of this tank, so there's what's called a baffle, and the liquid that has then separated from the waste goes to the other part of the tank, which it's then pushed into the bed area.
Right.
And then it gets soaked into the ground. What's left behind in the tank essentially is a sludge.
Which is what gets pumped out after a while.
Which is, after a few years, why you need to get your septic system pumped out. Most common things that ruin a septic system, things like grease, because of exactly what you said. But all of a sudden, people start flushing down dental floss or facial wipes or baby wipes and things that don't break down and they're not biodegradable. Yeah. And that starts clogging up the system. And then it also prevents the bacteria from properly doing its thing in the tank itself.
There's a story from our family cottage where a particular person was there having a party and the toilet stopped working. So one of the owners went to the property, took the toilet out, and found a bunch of condoms. Had to get them all out of the system because those are not flushable.
Condoms.
I mean, you shouldn't flush those, period.
Tampons.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that, if you stay, and buyer beware, if you're buying a property to be a rental like a cottage, just know people might be using the property, like in your example.
Oh, they will.
That don't care about what is going into your septic system. Yeah. So you have to budget for.
Well, whenever I'm talking to landlords, even long-term tenancies, you have to kind of go into it expecting to have repairs that you wouldn't normally have. And in the case of a septic system, that's one of them.
External care. Tips on external care. Don't drive over the system or compact the soil with heavy equipment. Don't dig around it or build anything on top of it. Don't cover the septic system with concrete. Yeah, no shit. Divert roof.
But if you do, then you can drive on it.
Yeah. Divert roof drainage and downspouts away from it. Do not plant deep-rooted vegetation near the system. Their roots may penetrate into it.
It's a common problem.
Never plant a vegetable garden over the lateral field. Microbes from the effluent might travel through the soil and contaminate the
It's a
crop.
shitty tasting tomato.
Yeah. Why does my broccoli taste like shit? Internal care. Keep your drains clean. If it's not biodegradable, it doesn't belong in your system, just like we spoke about. No sanitary napkins, disposable diapers, cigarettes, cat litter, condoms, any packaging, or cotton swabs. No cooking oils. This can harden the tank, build up, and can cause a blockage. No toxic chemicals, paints, pesticides, solvents, or any kind of poisons can contaminate your groundwater and kill the bacteria in your system. And use low phosphorus laundry detergent. Liquid detergent is much better than using powders.
So, but to summarize most of that, it's really not that different
Common sense
than a municipal service, right? As far as sewage, you shouldn't be doing that in any sewage system. So don't be afraid of it. Just be aware of how to properly dispose of things.
Right.
So that's what it kind of comes down to.
Maintenance. Maintenance is a few things, not only the preventative stuff that we just said, spacing out any heavy water usage. So you don't want to be running your dishwasher, having a shower, and doing a load of laundry all at the same time.
So just on that, I think it's important to make sure that the septic system is sized properly to the house, because if you have an undersized system and somebody's done an addition without permits or whatever, that becomes a big issue because you really don't want to have to worry about that in a house.
Correct. I was going to get into the aspects of buying. I got more into the aspects of maintenance for peace of mind. But yes, I think now in Ontario, don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure the minimum size requirement is 3,000 liters. So from there, it goes based on how many operating fixtures you have, plumbing fixtures. So a laundry would be considered one, each sink, each toilet, each shower, etc. And then it goes based on bedrooms and people. So how much use is going to be used.
Yeah. Well, and if you are getting a new one, I would say plan ahead and maybe get something slightly larger than you think. Because if down the road you decide, I want to add a bunkie or, a coach house or just an extra bathroom in the basement or whatever.
Right.
These things need to be accounted for.
And even if it's not you, a future owner might want to do those things.
Well, that's a big selling feature. If you sell in 10 years and the tank's still got 30 years left on it, whatever, it's likely that some renovation may occur during that time.
It's a great segue into how long does a septic system last? So there is no right answer for this. It does depend on location in terms of what is the septic tank and leaching bed or septic bed area in, like the soil or sand or what have you. The type of maintenance that was done and the preventative care that was done over the length of ownership. So as an example, if you are buying a cottage and that cottage was a rental for many, many years where it was rented every week of every year, it might have had a little bit harder use over the years. But typically 20 to 30 years is kind of the lifespan. Some will last longer if you're taking care of it.
I've spoken with a number of septic companies who've done some inspections, and like 40 to 60 years is not uncommon.
Correct.
It's really how it's used.
Yeah.
That I think is a big determining factor.
Somebody's
Somebody's screensaver just turned on. Just a point, if you're looking at a property that does have one, signs you can look out for that might indicate there's a problem
Let's
with it.
get into that,
Even
yes.
before you have an inspection
Mhm.
done. Spongy ground coverage around the septic bed shouldn't occur.
Yeah, or weird colors, right? Like
Weird colors,
sometimes
if
you'll
you've-
see brown or even really green grass.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, or smells. It should not emit an odor.
no.
More commonly, if there's a problem, you'll find it after a rainfall because you get an excessive amount of water in the system.
Mm-hmm.
So those are things to look out for. And even if you're flushing toilets, if there's drainage problems, if occurring very slowly, that could be an indication. If you've got like bubbles coming back through the system, that can be an indication.
Yeah, and in the bed area, if you have what looks like a lot of discolored weeds, almost like mini weed crops that are in like a mossy kind of wet. I don't know.
That goes to the sponginess of it.
That
yeah.
sponginess. Yeah, that is an indication that something might be failing in the system.
Yeah.
Something might be blocked.
But to summarize it, those are rare occurrences. And if you're treating it properly, you should not have these issues. And I would highly suggest people not to be intimidated by them. Just educate yourself. The pros that come with it means you're getting a house that probably has more land, more privacy. There's a lot of benefits that come with it.
Well, the cost of maintenance is not very much. Depending on usage, you might have to get the septic tank pumped every 4 to 8 years. It's not that expensive. General would be maybe around $300 on average. Some might be a little bit less, some might be more, depends on the size. So you're spending a few $100 every few years to get it pumped out. It's just routine upkeep without abusing it. And that's it. Do your homework. Ask questions.
Get it inspected.
You know,
if
immediately
you can. You may not be able
get
to.
it inspected. Yeah. How much does an inspection cost? It depends on the level of the inspection. If it's a proper inspection for septic that is done by a specialist in that area,
which includes the pump out.
You're probably somewhere $600 to $1,000. Maybe more if you're using full camera.
It also depends on how accessible it is. A lot of people's access point is now under a deck or it's a foot underground. You got to dig it up. So there's a lot of factors. Or in the middle of the winter. Well, it's not as easy.
Yeah. And some companies, some septic pump out / inspection companies, they don't have equipment that might be long enough to access where it is. So sometimes you need a special company to do it, depending on what the situation is. But if you are purchasing a home that has a septic system, ask lots of questions to the realtor that is representing the sellers, but also talk to the sellers if you can, because you will immediately know if that seller is very meticulous in their upkeep of the septic system or if they're not.
Well, and you'll find nowadays, especially new rural owners that are reselling, so maybe even people that have been there a decade, may not even know where the septic system is.
Yeah, if
right?
they don't know
idea
where the lids to their tank are,
right?
That's sign number one that
that
system might not be maintained properly.
Yeah, half the real estate agents I deal with on rural properties do not immediately know.
Yeah. I know from good owners that are very aware of the septic system. They're very cautious, like when they have guests. That's the first thing they say to guests.
Yeah.
You know, don't be cooking bacon on Sunday morning and throw that bacon grease down telling the kids, don't be flushing anything down the toilet.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So do your homework. Nothing to be afraid of. Costs over the lifespan of the septic system are pretty low. Now, some people will debate with me whether or not this is a good idea, but it's something that I do. You can buy microbes that are specific for septic systems to help build the right kind of bacteria in your tank to help break down all of the solid waste. I won't give a shout out to the one I use because I don't know particularly if there's any difference between any of them or whatever, but basically it's a powdered formula.
I don't know whether or not they're useful.
There are debates.
Right.
Some people swear by them. Some people say you're not putting enough into the system for it to make a difference, and it's not the natural occurring bacteria that's actually doing the work in the septic tank. You're introducing a new enzyme, and that enzyme has no place in the tank. I use it.
Well, the argument could stand for taking probiotics.
Exactly. So same kind of concept.
Yeah.
So you can buy them. The one I buy is organic and specific to septic tank treatments, and it's not expensive. You put a couple of scoops down your toilet every month or whatever, and it's supposed to help upkeep the system. So I'm getting mine pumped out later this year because it's been 5 years. And I'd rather be preemptive and do it before it's actually needed. And when you do get your septic tank pumped out, you want to make sure it's in advance of the winter so that the tank can develop that bacteria again and have some waste in it before the freezing weather approaches. So I'm going to get mine done this summer, and we'll see if the way I've treated it, because when we bought it, we had it pumped out and inspected. So it's only my usage over the last 5.5, 6 years. So we'll see.
I've also heard arguments about that whole concept of
pumping it out
in the winter. Last time we did a pump out, I mentioned it to the guy because it was pushing colder weather. And he said, oh, no, that's an old thing. It doesn't really apply anymore with the new tanks. And the argument then wasn't, because they're below the frost line. Like it shouldn't affect it temperature-wise as far as the microbes, whatever. The thing back then was something to do with shifting because of the cold. If it didn't have enough
if it
weight
was
in
a steel
it
tank?
Or something. I'm not sure.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Types of tanks, by the way. You have concrete. That is quite common to have a concrete tank. They last long, but if you, like we were talking about heavy equipment, if you drive over it, the concrete certainly could be damaged.
Well, just on that driving over, a property we sold in Aaron a couple years ago, the moving company.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Because the septic bed was near the driveway. They backed up over top and we caught it on camera. So make sure if you have stuff, if it's close to the driveway and is maybe, accessible by a large delivery truck, just be very cautious. I think that covers everything.
I think so. I think that's enough information to hopefully guide our audience in the right direction. I think it's important that your realtor be somebody that has knowledge. That person should have knowledge on septic systems,
or at least get the knowledge.
Get the knowledge.
You've got to start somewhere.
Yeah, it's
not hard. It's very easy to learn about them. Just need to get in touch with the right people and
ask a lot of questions. And don't be afraid of them. That's it.
Sounds good.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching episode 234. Give us a like, leave a comment, and make sure you hit that bell so you get future notifications.